Instead of giving you the whole rundown of this year's prize structure right up front, we thought it would be fun to tease it out a little with our lineup of incredible talks. So first, let's hear from Todd Modema, Staff Product Manager at a prominent green energy company. Todd is deeply passionate about the intersection of making and sustainability. He is a product manager working on battery energy storage and the founder of Maker House, a community of makers in Pittsburgh. Please welcome Todd.
I'm Todd Modema, a maker sustainability nerd and product manager in the clean energy space. And today I wanted to talk about sustainability, since it is the theme of today's prize. But before we get too deep into that, I wanted to sidebar on climate crisis anxiety. It's a very real thing. I struggle with it, and I imagine many of you feel the same with the 24-hour news cycle and all of the scary things that seem to be happening. It can be hard to feel optimistic about the future. And in some sense, they're right. The choices that we make today could make the future miserable. But we also can make choices today that will make the future awesome. And not just awesome in the sense that the apocalypse doesn't happen, but like literally more awesome than it is today. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, will we make the choices that give us more time to make this awesome future possible? Or are we going to make choices that speed up the clock and make it harder and harder to reach for a future that is exciting? Hence, sustainability. Now, I actually think about sustainability as two different words that work together as a whole: sustain and ability. To me, sustaining is about minimizing impact, being more efficient with what we have, giving us more time. But on its own, it's kind of unfulfilling, right? It's just like conserve, conserve, conserve. And it seems like the ultimate answer to sustainability is to just not do anything. And that's not enough, right? We as humans want to do. And that's where ability comes in, because ability is all about maximizing potential. With the time and the resources we have, how can we do incredible things and be the most human possible? And so only when you think about these in tandem can you see like a future that's really exciting, where we're both conserving resources and giving ourselves more opportunities, but then we're making the most of the opportunities we give. Now, why think about sustainability at all? Well, I'm sure everyone has a different reason, but at least for me, it's that I want to see humanity survive long enough to expand to space. And the reason for that is I think that that is a truly awesome future. To put that in context, there are over 100 billion times more resources available off Earth than on Earth. That's a really big number. Like, to put that in context, every human alive today would have several planets worth of resources at their disposal. Like, think about what you could do if you had the entire Earth. Like, the amount of human actualization you could achieve is just incredible. And, sure, this is far off. This is like if we colonized the entire galaxy. So it might seem a little dreamy, but even close to home, there is a single near-Earth asteroid, 16 Psyche, that might contain more nickel than the entire planet Earth. Like, we use nickel in a lot of things, like batteries and stainless steel, and just imagine what we could do if we had twice as much nickel. Like, things that seem kind of like cool but expensive today, like electric vehicles or 3D printing stainless steel, would become plebeian, like arbitrarily cheap. So there's even just getting off of Earth unlocks huge new human potentials. And so this all comes back to this question of clearly we aren't quite at the space harvesting age yet. And so to get there, how can we do more with less? And there are some fantastic examples of this that have already happened. The classic one is the light bulb. From the original incandescent bulbs to modern LED bulbs, they produce comparable light. In fact, oftentimes they have cool features like controlling with your phone or adjusting color temperature, but they use 7 times less energy. if we could achieve 7x efficiency improvements across the entirety of humanity, climate change wouldn't be a thing. Like, that is an incredible improvement in efficiency. But it's not the only one. If we look at cars, if you go from a gas SUV to an electric SUV, it's comparable size, comparable price, but it uses 5 times less energy to give you that same freedom and that same mobility. So there's, great examples of sustaining, but then what about ability? Well, the classic example, right, is modern computers. If you go from the original Android smartphone to one that you can buy off the shelf today, it's the same size. It uses the same input resources, and yet it's 30 times faster. Obviously there's not a linear correlation between CPU speed and like what you can do as a human, but still having something that's 30 times faster in your pocket does let you do a whole new set of activities. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, right? These are the obvious, famous examples, but there really is so much more to do. So we're going to go through a few of my pet projects where I think there's a lot of opportunities for us makers to have sustainable impacts. The first one is homes. The US residential building sector uses over 20% of the energy of the entire United States. I think we can do better than that through a number of ways. The first, local production. Everyone talks about solar panels. Those are going pretty well, but there's a lot of other ways that you can produce energy. What if you had a wind turbine on your house? What if your house has a stream and you're able to harvest hydroelectric energy? And even once you're harvesting this energy, the sun doesn't always shine when you want to turn your lights on. And so how do you store that energy? There are whole house batteries on the market today. They're still quite expensive, $10,000 or more. So what can we do to bring that cost down and make it more accessible? And of course, adding solar panels and batteries is great and all, but what if you're able to reduce your consumption to the point that you need fewer solar panels and batteries? That not only saves you money, but means that we have to spend less resources building these panels and batteries. Another one that's less commonly talked about is time shifting. If you look at the screenshot of the solar panels in my house, you can see, the sun isn't shining when some of the appliances are using electricity. What if we could be smarter about when we're using that electricity so that, maybe your water heater heats up when there's plenty of solar power available for free? Pretty sure the water heater one is already done, but there are so many appliances in your house and so many things about our lifestyle that we as makers might be able to enable smarter time shifting. So that's homes, obviously one that strikes close to home. But another one is transportation, which uses over 20% of the emissions of the entire United States. Now, there's obviously a lot that goes into transportation as a whole sector. You have flights, you have long-distance car trips, freight shipping. But one particular thing that strikes me is that 60% of automotive trips are less than 6 miles. And that's bad not just for the emissions, but it also means that cities have to build more roads and more parking, increasing the cost of living and destroying natural habitats for something that it seems like there are a lot of other options, right? Under 6 miles, you can walk, you can bike, you can scooter. So my question is, how can we make these other non-automotive options faster, safer, and really just more convenient so that if someone has to go to the grocery store, they reach for their bike keys instead of their car keys? I especially like this one because we're talking about small forms of mobility. They tend to be very cheap, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity for makers to devise small, affordable convenience improvements as opposed to trying to make airplanes more efficient. Another one is plastics. Did you know that less than 9% of plastic is recycled? After all of these decades, like aluminum, over 90% recycled, cardboard, glass, all of these things are very well recycled, but we have yet to crack the code on plastic, and it just bugs the heck out of me. Even with awesome nonprofits like Precious Plastic doing their darndest, we cannot seem to crack the code on this, but I think there are some great opportunities for makers. Precious Plastic has already set the stage of building local processing, shredding and reprocessing tooling, but they clearly haven't quite cracked the code, right? If we're still only at 9% recycled, there's something else missing from that processing formula. So what can we as makers do to leverage what they've already done and make it even more accessible to reprocess plastic? But on top of reprocessing, you also have this problem of reuse. Even if you could shred all of the plastic in the world into recycled pellets, what can we do with that recycled plastic that is as valuable as possible? Because the more valuable we can make that recycled plastic, the more incentive there is to process it. So whether that be 3D printing or injection molding, what techniques can we do to create truly valuable items from recycled plastic? And in that same vein, reduce, reuse, recycle is also this question of reducing. What things can we as makers create that help us evolve past single-use plastic? Whether that be making things that are more durable so they aren't just single-use, or making single-use items that aren't out of plastic. The standard example being a biodegradable fork. But there's clearly 300 million tons a year of plastic are consumed. So there's a huge opportunity here. So these three have been about sustaining, right? How do we be more efficient with our home and transportation and plastics usage? Now let's talk a little bit about ability. I'm a total space nerd here. And like I said, I think space is really the long-term future. And so my ability challenge for us makers is how can we accelerate space resource development? There's a lot to this one. It's very, very open field. Everything from the discovery of these resources, how can we as amateur astronomers enable the detection and scoping out of potential asteroids or planets to harvest? And then the harvesting, how you mine something in space is totally different than anything we've done on Earth. It's zero gravity, it's a vacuum. Asteroids are very loosely held together, so if you try to hit them with a pickaxe, they just fly apart. So we're going to need whole new sets of technologies to harvest these things. And the same with processing. How we smelt metals is all based on having an atmosphere and gravity, and how can we do that in space? And of course, manufacturing too. Even if we have an Earth's worth of nickel in the sky, what then can we do with that? Both in terms of just making the same things up there, but also are there novel things that we can do that actually capitalize on the benefits of space? For example, there's one company that has figured out how to make perfect fiber optic cables in space, something that is not achievable on Earth, that are significantly more efficient. And so can we leapfrog manufacturing technologies on Earth to make even better items in space? But all of this hops back to sustainability, right? Can we as makers give our species more time, help us minimize our impact and be more efficient? Or with the resources that we do have, can we enable our species to accomplish more and achieve a more human self-actualization? So with all that, I ask you, are you ready to expand our future? Thank you. Yeah, so this is actually my most anticipated question. It is a well-known paradox that as you make something more efficient, people actually use so much more of it that they end up consuming more resources than if it had been less efficient. And to some degree, I think of that as self-actualization. Maybe just sending a GIF instead of an OK isn't super self-actualizing. But the other thing to think about, and if we're really trying to make things more efficient without driving more use, is what sort of biological limits are there, right? An example, I can only wear one shirt a day. So if we can make my shirt lower impact through better materials or through needing to be washed less, that just, that reduces the footprint without being able to increase use.